I assumed my wife Lisa would be pleased when I told her I didn't have to work all week. I am a heavy equipment mechanic, and unfortunately I end up working long hours. Lisa had a 3-day vacation planned with her sisters at Lake Winona. They usually rent cabins, and the families spend 3 days swimming, hiking, and having fun around the campfire. I had already told my wife I couldn't make it, and she seemed to understand. It was the middle of the week. I was making good money, especially on overtime. I missed most of those walks, so I was very glad when I could get some rest. "Hey, honey, good news. I'll be able to join you guys this time." "That's great, Bob. I'm sure the kids will appreciate it, and you'll have fun too. If you don't mind, I'll bring my sport bike. There are some marked trails out there that I'd like to try. I'll only do that if you don't mind. I don't want to cause any problems." "That's good. Lake Winona has a lot of mountains, and you should ride them. Enjoy life." Lisa cooked dinner while I went to get the motorcycle ready. It wasn't really an off-road motorcycle. It was a 2-stroke engine that was street legal, but it could be used off-road if you didn't get too hung up on it. I didn't have much opportunity to use it at home. Dinner was ready by about the time I was done. We usually ate together every night. Lisa and I had been married for 12 years. We had 3 children. Tammy was 11, Josh was 8, and Terry was 7. We had a nice little frame house with a big mortgage, and things were going great for the Connor family. After dinner was done, the kids settled down in front of the TV, and I took a shower. Lisa was finishing up something on the computer when I stopped by to pull out my trail maps. I noticed that she quickly deleted something and logged out when I entered the room. I pretended not to notice anything as I rummaged through the closet. She smiled and left the room, so I quietly pressed the cancel shutdown button. After making sure she was downstairs, I opened her email. There was nothing in her inbox, and even if there had been, I was sure she would have deleted it. I looked through the deleted mail just in case. Lisa was a very cautious person, especially when it came to her email. I never questioned her about it. She usually deleted everything twice. There was never any record of her incoming or outgoing mail. This time, however, she was in a hurry, and I noticed that she deleted the file, but didn't delete the deleted file itself. Here it is. "There's been a change of plans. Bob is coming with us. You can still come, but I'll have Kathy put you up in the last cabin. We'll be able to spend time together because he'll be riding his motorcycle. I'll see you later. LK." Message sent to D. Thompson at zebra.net. That was not good. Who the hell was D. Thompson, and why was he coming to our family gathering? What did Lisa's sister Kathy have to do with this? Lisa was washing some clothes the kids wanted to take on an outing, so I pulled her high school yearbook off the shelf. It didn't take me long to find Don Thompson. There was even a picture of Lisa and Don together at prom. I've never been a very smart guy, and I've never been a very suspicious guy. I probably should have been. I assumed that things were generally good in our marriage. I met Lisa about 2 years after she graduated from high school. I was 3 years older than her and had a good job. After we dated for about 6 months, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. Now I was wondering why. If she dated this guy in high school and was still dating him, why the hell would she marry me? I was making a good living, even though I thought I had never been very ambitious. I worked hard for my family. I could care less about myself. I had always thought it was worth it for their sake, but now I wasn't so sure. I had never loved children, but I loved my children. I would do anything for them, simply because they were mine. I was a very caring father. The weekend promised to be interesting. The kids, wasting no time, made their way down to the lake. I ended up unloading everything, including the bike. Lisa's sister Kathy was there with her 4 kids. The youngest sister, Cora, was divorced and had 3 little ones. Kathy's husband, George, did not attend. It seemed that I would be an extra for the weekend, except for the extra guy who was supposed to be in the last cabin. As I settled in, I noticed a dark green Durango parked at the last cabin. We all grabbed a quick bite to eat, and I announced that I was going for a ride. I prepped the motorcycle and grabbed my video camera before I left. The motorcycle was a noisy little devil, and I was sure Lisa was counting on it so she could be sure I wouldn't sneak back. I rode about half a kilometer, let the bike idle for a bit, and then turned it off. The ride back to the campground only took about 10 minutes. The 3 sisters sat at the picnic table and chatted while the kids were scattered everywhere. About that time, a tall, good-looking guy, who I assumed drove a Durango, approached the table. All the girls greeted him warmly. After about 10 minutes, he got up and left. He walked around the stalls and headed toward the locker rooms. I started to make my way forward when I saw Lisa get up from the table and head in his direction. Dawn entered through the back door on the women's side so no one would notice, and Lisa followed a short time later. I quietly walked in from the other side and turned on the video camera. I didn't even take the cap off the lens because there was nothing to see. I snuck over to a nearby wall and could hear their conversation. "I'm really sorry, Dawn. I had no idea Bob was coming today. I'll try to make it up to him. He'll probably be riding his motorcycle most of the time, so all we have to do is watch the kids." "It's okay, Lisa. I understand. I'm a little disappointed, but I'm sure it'll be fine either way. They're gonna have a little party at the cabins tonight. I'll sneak down to the lake and we can swim together like old times. Kathy will make sure Bob has something to do." "I don't know if I can wait that long." "Silly boy, let's see. I think I can take care of you for a little while to get you through until dark." I heard the sound of zippers being unzipped and clothes being removed. When Dawn started to flinch, it was obvious what my wife was doing. After a few coughing fits, Lisa started giggling. "Okay, Dawn, that's enough for you until tonight. I need to get back to my sisters." I sat there stunned. I was heartbroken, but what the hell did I expect? I was sneaking around trying to catch her, and I succeeded. I guess I was disappointed it even happened, but I knew it would. I stayed there for another 10 minutes after they left, trying to figure out what to do. It was depressing as hell, and I hated being depressed. I didn't get any video, but I recorded 10 minutes of good sound on the camera. I got back on the bike and then went for a long, hard ride. I needed something to cool off. It would have been so easy to meet Lisa face to face and figure things out, but that just wasn't my style. In fact, I didn't really have a style. I just didn't confront most problems. For 12 years, I thought I had a great marriage, and now I find out I was just the breadwinner for my wife and kids. A necessary comfort. I spent most of the afternoon exploring the area around the beach. There was a long, grassy slope down to the water's edge. The beach was narrow, with rocks and woods on the sides. In the middle, about 15 meters from the beach, was a place for a campfire. Lisa, Kathy, and Cora took the kids for a walk to a local waterfall. I spent time gathering and spreading lots of firewood in the fire pit. I put the kindling in the bottom and carefully stacked some nice dry logs on the side. I found some cardboard that I was able to lay on the bottom to make it easier to get started. There weren't many people on the site, so I didn't attract anyone's attention. I didn't notice Dawn anywhere. When everyone got back from their walk, I took Josh and Terry into the woods and we cut up about 20 good marshmallow baking sticks. I told them to keep it a secret until tonight. They were thrilled with it. I gave Tammy 2 big bags of marshmallows and explained again what we were going to do. Evening came and everyone gathered around the picnic area. We had a nice dinner and the kids were getting ready to leave for the day. Katie was very talkative and stayed close to me. She asked me to help her with some frivolous little things and was very friendly. I kept my eyes on Lisa but tried not to make too much eye contact. Finally, the sun went down and there was only a little bit of moonlight. The argument about what we were going to do for the rest of the evening continued, and it looked like Ghost Stories was winning by a small margin. Suddenly, I noticed that Lisa was gone, and Kathy was standing quite close to me. I got a very detailed explanation about how Kathy's husband, George, was remodeling their kitchen. She made a great effort to interest me, but my thoughts were far away. Eventually, I apologized and went to the lodge to get the video camera. Since it was on the opposite side of the lake, Kathy didn't seem too concerned. It was too dark to videotape anything, so I didn't bother to get the camera. I grabbed 2 cans of kindling and some wooden matches. Once behind the cabins, I was able to walk down the slope to the beach without Kathy seeing me. The moonlight was just enough to keep me from killing myself. As I got closer, I got quieter. I could make out 2 figures in the water. There was a blanket lying on the grassy area near the beach. Lisa and Dawn had left their clothes and underwear on the blanket along with 2 towels. I carefully lifted all 4 corners of the blanket and walked over to the fire pit. I poured 1 can of kindling onto the wood and then placed the blanket on top and added the kindling liquid. In a quick motion, I threw a match on the pile of fuel and bounced back. I was still too slow. I set my eyebrows and the hair on my arm on fire as the log burst into flames. That served as a signal. Tammy and Josh jumped up and started screaming, "Marshmallow roast! Everyone to the campfire!" All the kids ran down the slope to the fire pit. I looked down at the water and saw Lisa. The light from the campfire reflected in Lisa and Don's eyes as they watched the surprise sinking down on them. I saw Katie at the top of the hill, and she looked like the world was about to end. The kids quickly settled around the fire. Josh handed out sticks and Tammy took the marshmallows. Lisa tried to hide along the dock as I slowly made my way out. I looked at her lover. "Hi, Don. I'm Bob, Lisa's husband. It's nice to finally meet you." He seemed flustered and didn't say anything. "Lisa, can I help you up the stairs so you can join your kids around the campfire?" "Hell no. Just go over to the blanket and get our towels." "I'm sorry, dear. I'm afraid I used the blanket, towels, and clothes to start the fire. It's a nice fire, isn't it?" "No, Bob, no. What the hell did you do that for? How are we going to get out of the water?" "I'm sure Katie will be more than happy to help you. I'm going home." Kathy passed me on the dock as I was leaving. I walked up the hill and no one even noticed me leave. I grabbed my jacket and videotape from the lodge. Using the valve stem tool from the tool bag, I removed 4 valve stems from Lisa's SUV. She wouldn't be able to fix them until the next day. I took the pliers and tried to open the faucet on Don's Durango, but I couldn't budge it. I ended up hitting it 3 times before it just snapped off. The Durango wasn't locked, so I reached inside and pulled his license plate number out of the glove compartment. I realized that Lisa could have just taken one of her sister's cars, but I figured she'd wait until she got her own. I turned off my cell phone and rode my motorcycle out of the campground and onto the highway. It was a long drive on an uncomfortable vehicle. I didn't get very far because I had to stop and fill up the suction cup and mix gasoline and oil. At least it was late and the roads weren't too crowded. I leveled the car and started dropping kilometers. A green Durango passed me at a good speed, and I noticed some white fumes billowing out from underneath it. About 10 miles farther down the road, it was stopped. Don Thompson leaned under the hood, trying to figure out what the problem was. I flew by unnoticed and headed for the next gas station. A bigger gas tank wouldn't hurt. After filling up, I had a cup of coffee and pulled the Durango's registration number out of my pocket. Don lived in Pottsville, which meant I could turn around right now and be there in less than an hour. Of course, after I got there, I had to find the address. That took another hour. He lived in a modest frame house south of town. I couldn't tell if he owned the house or rented it. Either way, I figured he wouldn't be home for a while, so I broke a window in the kitchen door and got inside. Don had a small computer area set up in his bedroom. I found an impact wrench in a desk drawer and removed the side of the CPU. Pulling out the hard drive, I looked around for anything else that might be of interest. On the corner of the desk was a CD album-type book with about 20 discs in it. I grabbed it and the hard drive and left. Less than 2 hours later, including another gas station, I was home. It was at this point that I was glad my pickup truck had a large trunk. I was able to stash my clothes, computer, and some household items behind the seat. I gathered up a bunch of personal papers and documentation and headed for a motel on the other side of town. It was 3 in the morning. I had to take a short nap because tomorrow was going to be a busy day. As tired as I was still up early. It took me a while to connect to Don's hard drive, but I finally did. Don seemed to have saved all the emails he and Lisa had written to each other. Most of them were saved in his document file, but many were still in his mail. I started to read them, but I didn't have much time. It would take me all day to read them all. I looked at a few here and there to get an idea of what was going on. They were definitely having sex, but the emails weren't dirty. I didn't find a single place where they said anything derogatory about me. On the contrary, there were several comments that indicated just the opposite. Lisa commented on the excellent job I did installing the new kitchen cabinets, and Don replied that he wished he was as skillful as I was. It was a little strange. Here were 2 people who had cheated on me, but had in no way abandoned me. I was confused. The discs were another confusing story. There were no compromising pictures. There were lots of pictures of them doing all sorts of things together, but none obscene. In one of the pictures, her hair was dark and short. This was when she was wearing Tammy. In the next picture, her hair was brown when she was giving birth to Josh, and then long and dark when she was pregnant with Terry. In all the pictures, Don was glowing like a proud father. It was really hurting. It was time to hit the road. I made my usual rounds. First, I closed all bank accounts and credit cards. I quit my job and took all my vacation and sick pay. I cashed in my life insurance policies and canceled my cell phone service. I arranged to have my utilities disconnected at the end of the week. I was sure I was going to miss something, but I did the best I could. I stopped by the family doctor's office and had the nurse take a DNA swab with instructions to send the results to my attorney. I then went into the lawyer's office and filled out the divorce papers. I told Seymour not to give her anything and to only offer alimony if the DNA test showed that it was mine. At that point, I had little hope. I left $2,000 in a current account for Lisa and her children. I told her she could have the house but would have to make the payments herself. I left 2 signed powers of attorney in case he needed them. I signed one form to help her sell the house. Yuba City was a long way from Redding. I had enough money to support myself for a long time, but I knew I had to start working to keep from going crazy. I was pretty sure I had left some trouble behind, including a charge of breaking and entering in Schuylkill County. I had no idea what things I had missed at home that I was legally responsible for, and I didn't care too much. I also wasn't very smart when it came to laying low. Registering my car, driver's license, and insurance would be good for a while, but eventually I'd have to update my information and run the risk of being discovered. Bank accounts and employment could also have caused problems. Every morning, gangs of men looking for day jobs would gather at certain key intersections. Potential employers would drive by and pick the ones they wanted, paying them cash on an independent contractor basis. No SSN or filling out any forms was required. A day of hard work was rewarded with some amount of cash that could not be traced. I didn't mind the work or the low pay, but I found myself frustrated that I couldn't talk to my coworkers at work. I started learning a little Spanish, and things got better. Eventually, I became a regular picker for the foreman of the Sutter walnut growers. They grew walnuts, almonds, hazelnuts, and pistachios. The work was challenging and didn't require too many brain cells from me. I slept well at night. After about a month, I borrowed a cell phone from one of the executives and called my attorney. He handed Lisa the paperwork. She wanted nothing from me but insisted on some support for the children. She did not provide him with any DNA test results. I told him I would not pay child support for other people's children. Her parents and siblings helped her with expenses until she could find a job. She has put the house up for sale. If all goes well, the divorce will be final in 4 months. Don Thompson hasn't filed a report with the Schuylkill County Police. I guess I didn't have to hide anymore. I spent my evenings reading emails and looking at CD photos. About 4 years ago, Lisa and Kathy went on a weekend cruise to Nassau. Lisa spent the cruise with Don Thompson, and Kathy was with another guy, not George, her husband. I was able to find out from emails that his name was Richard Witt. The pictures were not very nice to look at. It was obvious from the pictures that Lisa and Don lived in the same cabin. I loved Lisa and would have done anything for her. I was having a hard time taking in all the new information I was finding. How could I have been so stupid? Sutter nut growers had 2 large tree shakers. One had been broken since I started working there, and today the second one broke. The company had to call in a specialist from Sacramento to fix them. They were going to shorten the workday and send everyone home, so I asked the manager if I could take a look at it. It only took me about an hour to get it up and running. All my friends were happy because they had finished their work shift. I spent the rest of the day working on the second shaker and finally got it up and running around 7 p.m. Everyone else had left early, so Supervisor John Foreman offered me a ride home. On the way home, he offered me a permanent full-time job as an equipment repairman, which I immediately accepted. About a month later, I came home from work and found an inexpensive rental car in my driveway. George Mitchell, Kathy's husband, had found me. He was sitting on the porch and smiled slightly at me as I approached the house. I wasn't really happy to see him, but I tried to be friendly. "How long have you been waiting, George?" "About 2 hours. I'd have a cold beer if you have one." I got us both Fosters, and we sat on opposite sides of the plastic kitchen table. "What could be so important that you would fly almost 5,000 kilometers to see me, George?" "Lisa asked me to go, and her parents paid for the cost of the tickets." "Okay, let's get started. First of all, what are you trying to accomplish?" "I spent the whole flight trying to figure out the right approach to this. Let me tell you something that not a lot of people know about concerning Kathy and me." "Is it about Richard Witt?" "Yes. I guess it wasn't as big a secret as we'd hoped." I just smiled. Bob, all three of the Spencer girls, Lisa, Katie, and Cora, wanted to have big families. It was important to them, and it was very important to their parents. We had been married for 2 years, and we had no luck. The test showed that I was the problem. I was shooting blanks, and Katie was fine. We didn't want to adopt and couldn't afford artificial procedures. It took a long time, but eventually we agreed that we would try to find someone else to get Katie pregnant. I realize that sounds strange, but we thought about it a lot. Richard had been a friend of mine since high school. Katie had dated him and had sex with him before she met me. He was one of the officiants at our wedding. I liked Richard, so Kathy and I met with him to explain the problem. He resisted at first and only agreed to some concessions. Concessions? Richard said he would make Katie pregnant as many times as we wanted, but he wanted to be able to see her once a month and one weekend a year. On those terms, he was willing to help until he found a wife. All 4 of our children are Richard's children. About 3 years ago, I was best man at his wedding, and he hasn't seen Kathy since. What does that have to do with me and Lisa? Same thing, but different. I assume you're going to explain that. Lisa and Don Thompson had been in love with each other since junior high school. They had their whole life together planned out, except for one problem. Don had a water skiing accident right after graduating from high school. He could still have sex, but he couldn't father children. Lisa was devastated. The most important thing in her life was going to be the children. Don convinced Lisa that she should get married so that she could have a family of her own and that they could remain close friends. You mean sex buddies? Right. That's a crude way of putting it, Bob, but I think the answer is yes. I listened very carefully to what George was saying. Some of it sounded true, but most of it was bullshit. I decided to let him talk some more. Lisa eventually agreed, but asked Don to find her a husband. He didn't want anyone living in the Pottsville area, so he tracked down his friend in Reading, David Lipman. I believe you worked on some of David's gasoline trucks. Yeah, Dave seemed like a good guy. Well, they narrowed it down to 3 guys, and Lisa picked you. She pursued you, made you marry her, and let you think it was your idea. You gave her a nice home and a happy marriage and 3 beautiful children. She tried to be a loving wife to you while maintaining her relationship with Don. As the years went by, she grew closer to you and saw Don less and less often. She and Kathy both tried to set Don up with other girls, but he loved Lisa and wanted to keep his relationship with her. George slipped his hand into his coat pocket and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a DNA report. The letterhead read, Schuylkill Scientific Laboratories. I was expecting some kind of form, but it was just an official letter stating that I was the biological father of our 3 children. I looked over the report and looked at George. He didn't say anything. Is that it, George? That's good. Lisa cut off all contact with Don as soon as you left. She decided it was best for her and the kids. She hoped that when Don was out of her life for good, you'd reconsider the divorce and come home. I took 2 more beers. I didn't say anything, I just sat there staring at the paper. I couldn't believe this guy had flown an airplane across the county to feed me this crap. There might have been some truth somewhere, but I couldn't grasp it. I never understood why Lisa married me, and even after listening to George's nonsense, it didn't make any more sense. What time's your plane back, George? I have to be at the Sacramento terminal by 8 o'clock. That'll give me just enough time to get there and return the rental car. I really appreciate you coming all this way to explain everything to me, George. You probably could have done it over the phone, but I think face-to-face communication is more effective. Is there anything you want me to say to Lisa or the kids when I get home? I know she's hoping for some good news. She was really devastated when you left. I can't think of anything right now. Give them my best wishes and tell them I'll be thinking of them. I walked George to his car. I could tell he was hoping for a little more reaction than he got. It was an interesting story, especially when he started off by confessing his relationship with Kathy. If everything he said was true, then I might want to reconsider divorce, but there were too many holes in it. I felt a strong affection for Lisa. We had spent many wonderful years together, and I had always considered us a team. Her obvious betrayal broke my heart. I would like to mend it if I could. I sought more information and answers, and I wanted them to explain and make things better. I still couldn't believe George had flown all the way out here for a 30-minute conversation. The next day, I called my attorney. Seymour, this is Bob Connor from California. I don't hear from you very often, Bob. What do you need? First of all, have you ever gotten any official DNA paternity test results? Bob, I haven't gotten anything. I asked Lisa 3 times, and each time she promised, but I still got nothing. I told her I'd pay for the testing, but I don't think it made any difference. Lisa's brother-in-law gave me a letter from Schuylkill Science Labs in Pottsville stating that I am the father. Did you give them anything from my tests that they could use as a standard? I've never heard of this lab, and I still have your samples here in my office. I never gave them to anyone. Unless they did their own DNA test on your hair or fingernails, I have no idea what they were testing for. I'll look into it. Anything else? Do you have anyone to test a guy named Don Thompson who lives in Pottsville? I can't get away from the idea that knowing something about him might be important. I realize the divorce is almost final, and I don't want to mess it up, but if I can keep myself from making a mistake, I want to do it. There shouldn't be a problem with that. Do I owe you money? You still have a nice buffer in your account. I'll let you know if you get any closer. About a week later, Seymour called me and told me that Schuylkill's science lab in Pottsville was a fake DNA lab and had been shut down by the state. He also informed me that Don Thompson had a hard time graduating from high school. He was not very bright and had a hard time keeping a job. He had just been laid off from his last job as a gasoline truck driver and was having trouble finding anything else in the Pottsville area. It was reported that he was a nice man, but just not too smart. That evening, when I got home from work, Tammy, Josh, and Terry ran up to the truck. They pounced on me as I tried to make my way to the porch where their mother was waiting. To what did I owe this pleasure? I felt the children should be with their father, and since you didn't want to go back to Pennsylvania, I decided to bring them here. I've already rented a place across the river in Marysville. Why don't I send out for pizza and we can get settled? The kids spent the next hour telling me about their trip across the country. They hardly stopped at all during the trip, but they still saw a lot of new and exciting things. Lisa was quiet and just let the little ones chatter non-stop. I turned on the TV for them and they started to slowly relax. Lisa and I cleaned up after a messy dinner. Bob, I'm sorry about what happened. I was hoping George could explain it to you, but apparently he didn't do a very good job. The day after you caught me and Don together, I broke up with him. It was foolish of me to keep the relationship going as long as it had. I had known for several years now that our marriage was more important to me than my friendship with Don. We had been together for so long and so close that it was hard to break those bonds. I'm sorry if that sounds silly, but I don't know how else to explain it. I haven't seen Don since that day at camp, and I'm not going to see him again. I hope you realize that you are the one I love and want to spend the rest of my life with. You are the father of my children, and I want you to help raise them. I don't know what to say, Lisa. You caught me off guard. There are a lot of things I don't understand and probably don't want to understand. It's good to see the kids again, and I hope I can help you with them. Right now I don't feel comfortable enough to want to get into a relationship, but I'm open to working on it. That's okay. I understand your reluctance. I have a restaurant job scheduled that I'm starting next week in Marysville. I'll have to work evenings and weekends. I would appreciate it if you would watch the kids while I work until I can get some things ready. That sounds like fun to me. Are you going to drive them or do you want me to pick them up? I'll leave them here and pick them up after I'm done. I just hope it won't be too onerous. The arrangement seemed to work out fine. Needless to say, on the first day, I took DNA swabs from each of the kids' mouths and immediately mailed them to Seymour. Tammy was more candid than usual and seemed concerned about the relationship between Lisa and me. I didn't want to drag the kids into the mess and tried not to even mention the divorce. A letter arrived from George, and inside was a newspaper clipping and a note that simply said, FYI. On the clipping was a picture of Don in a soldier's uniform. He had finished basic training and was sent to Bosnia for 2 years. I called out to Tammy. Do you know this man? I asked, pointing to the picture. Of course I do. That's Uncle Don, but we're not supposed to talk to you about him. Do you see Uncle Don a lot? We used to, but we could never tell you what we did or Mom would get mad. Have you seen him since I left? Yeah. Where? Mostly we saw him at Chuck E. Cheese's or something like that. He and my mom would talk while we were playing slots and stuff. Did he ever stay home? Only once. It was the week before we left, and the day before he went into the army. Tell me about it. Okay, but I'm not supposed to. He came home in a cab. He told Mom that he had enlisted in the army and that he was leaving for Philadelphia the next morning. Mom started crying and hugging him. She was talking nonsense. Josh, Terry, and I went into the house and watched TV while she and Mom talked. She cried a lot and said things I couldn't understand. We all went to bed and they were still talking. I went downstairs in the middle of the night to get a drink, and he wasn't on the couch. The next morning, I looked out the window and saw him getting into a cab. Mom was still crying. She told us that day that we were going to California to see you. Don't tell your mom I told you that or she'll get really mad at me. Did your mom cry when I left? No, things were starting to make sense. I don't think the newspaper clipping got the results George was hoping for. I had been looking forward to getting back together with Lisa, but now I had my doubts. I would have loved to share all the information I had with her and let her explain some things, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was probably too much of a coward to get into an argument about fidelity with the woman I loved. I had no reason to believe that Tammy had lied to me, but what he told me contradicted what George and Lisa were saying. It seemed pretty obvious who was lying. I did what cowards always do. I was sitting in the Seattle airport when my cell phone rang. Dad, it's Tammy. Where are you? I'm at the Seattle airport, honey. When are you coming home? Not for another 10 months. I had to sign a contract to get this job, and I'm going to be busy for a long time. Mommy's really mad at me for telling you about Uncle Don. We're leaving to go back to Reading as soon as she gets her last paycheck at the restaurant. I think she's mad at you, too. Tammy, I'm sorry if I got you in trouble with your mother. Just remember, you didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault, and don't you forget it. I'm gonna miss you. Josh and Terry will miss you, too. I'm sorry you had to go, but I think I understand. I love you, honey, and tell Josh and Terry I love them, too. I called Seymour after Tammy hung up. The DNA results came back. None of the kids were mine. It was just another one of George and Lisa's lies. The divorce was going to be final in 2 weeks. I told Seymour that I would send money to support the children as long as no new problems arose. He agreed to settle it for me. It's cold as hell in Prudhoe Bay, but at least the knife wound on my back is healing.